The jack-o'-lanterns on our table were still flickering when my mother stood up, raised her wine glass, and announced to everyone at our Halloween dinner, "We wish you were never born." The serving spoon slipped from my hand, clattering against the china so loudly that all 20 members of the Addams family turned to stare. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table, but what happened next changed everything. I'm Octavia Adams. I'm 29 years old, and until that Halloween night, I thought I knew who my family was. Our annual Halloween gathering at the Addams Gothic Mansion in Salem, Massachusetts, had already started badly. Some teenage pranksters had been knocking on our door all evening, running away before anyone could answer. They'd finally jumped out at my mother Morticia in monster masks when she'd stepped outside to check, sending her into a rage that should have been my warning. She'd stormed back inside, her long black dress sweeping the floor like a storm cloud, muttering about disrespectful little demons. Ironic. Considering our family supposedly celebrated all things dark and twisted, I should have known something worse was coming when she kept glaring at me while I served my butternut squash soup with sage and brown butter. You see, I was the family disappointment, not because I'd failed at anything. Quite the opposite. After years of struggling to break into the culinary world, I'd finally started gaining recognition. Last week, a local food critic had called my pop-up dinner transcendent, and there were rumors that a major restaurant was interested in hiring me. But in the Addams family, creating beautiful food that brought people joy was apparently worse than any crime my prosecutor, Sister Wednesday, could put someone away for. "Look at her," Morticia said, her voice dripping with disdain as she pushed my carefully crafted soup away. "Serving people like a common servant. All those years we spent trying to mold you into something respectable, and this is what you choose? Where did we go wrong, Gomez?" My father just grunted, more interested in the financial papers he'd brought to dinner than defending me. Classic Gomez, only passionate about two things, my mother and money. My older sister Wednesday sat perfectly still, her prosecutorial posture making her look like she was already cross-examining me in her mind. She'd just won another high-profile murder case, which made her the star of tonight's family celebration. My younger brother Pugsley, who'd taken over the family funeral business at 25, smirked as he watched our mother's mood darken with each knock from those persistent pranksters outside. "At least Wednesday puts people away," Morticia continued, her pale fingers drumming against the dark wood table. "At least Pugsley helps them into the ground. But you feed them. You nourish them. You make them happy." She said the last word like it tasted rotten in her mouth. Another round of knocking echoed through the house, followed by teenage laughter. Morticia's eye twitched. The combination of the pranksters and my presence seemed to be pushing her over some invisible edge I hadn't seen coming. I tried to change the subject, mentioning that I'd been asked to cater the mayor's anniversary party. My biggest opportunity yet. That's when everything went sideways. Morticia stood up so fast her wineglass tipped, spreading red across the black tablecloth like blood. "The mayor," she hissed. "You think that matters? You think any of this matters?" She gestured wildly at me, her voice rising with each word. "You were never meant to exist, Octavia. You were a mistake that cost this family everything." The room went silent, except for another knock at the door. But this time, nobody laughed. "We were building an empire," she continued, her voice now deadly calm. "Your father was about to expand the funeral business across New England. We had plans, dreams, a legacy to protect. Then you came along, unplanned, unwanted. Your medical bills as a baby drained everything. 3 months in the NICU, specialists, surgeries, your constant need for attention, for light, for normalcy." My knees felt weak. I carefully set down the serving ladle, my hands trembling visibly now. 23 relatives watched in silence, their faces masks of uncomfortable acknowledgement. Nobody defended me. Nobody looked surprised. Even Wednesday avoided my eyes. "Every time I look at you," Morticia said, raising her glass in a mock toast, "I'm reminded of everything we lost. We tried to give you up, did you know that? Had the papers ready, but Mother Esther threatened to destroy us if we did. So we kept you. Our burden, our shame. So here's to the truth, finally. We wish you were never born. The teenagers knocked again, but this time it sounded hollow, distant, or maybe that was just the sound of my heart breaking into pieces I'd never be able to put back together. But as I stood there, watching my mother's satisfied smile while my hands still shook from the shock, something else started building inside me. Not sadness, not even anger. Something much more dangerous for the Addams family. Determination. They wanted me gone? They'd get their wish, but not in the way they expected. "Thank you, Mother," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "for finally being honest." I walked out of that dining room with my head high, even as I heard Pugsley laughing behind me. They had no idea what they just started. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mother's words echoed in my head like those persistent knocks from the pranksters. But instead of drowning in self-pity, I did what any good chef does. I started following the recipe of my life backward, looking for where the ingredients had gone wrong. I went to my tiny apartment's kitchen, my real home, and pulled out the one thing I'd taken when I'd moved out: Grandma Esther's old cookbook. The family thought it was worthless, just stained pages of basic recipes. But to me, it had always been a comfort. As I flipped through it at 3 a.m. trying to calm my racing mind, something fell out. A sealed envelope with my name on it in Grandma Esther's handwriting. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated just before her death 5 years ago. "My dearest Octavia, if you're reading this, you finally discovered what a pack of wolves your family truly is. Good. It's about time. You were never meant to be like them, darling. You were meant to be better. That's why I've left you something they don't know about. Something that will only reveal itself when you're ready to claim your true inheritance. The answer lies in my recipe collection, but not this book. Check the Salem Public Library's cookbook section. Reference number 641.5. I donated something special there. And remember, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful they have to watch you thrive. P.S. Your parents have been lying to you since birth. Start with the hospital records. Your mother's story doesn't add up. All my love, Grandma Esther. Check behind my portrait in the dining room next time you're alone in that horrible house. I left you a little starter fund they never found. Hospital records? The next morning, I called Salem General, pretending I needed my medical records for insurance. What they sent me made my blood run cold. Yes, I'd been in the NICU, but not for 3 months. For 3 weeks. Yes, there had been bills, but they'd been covered by Grandma Esther's insurance, not my parents' money. The total out-of-pocket cost to my parents? $3,000. Not the fortune my mother had described. But if I hadn't bankrupted them, what had? I spent the next week digging through public records at the courthouse. Wednesday would have been proud of my investigative skills if she'd cared. What I found was the real story. Gomez had lost the family fortune in a bad investment scheme the same year I was born. He'd put everything into a pyramid scheme involving luxury coffins for pets. The bankruptcy papers were dated 2 months before my birth. I wasn't the reason they'd lost everything. I was just the convenient scapegoat. Late one night, I snuck back into the family mansion using my old key. My parents were at some society funeral in Boston. I went straight to Grandma Esther's portrait and carefully checked behind it. Sure enough, there was a small safe built into the wall, painted to look like part of the wallpaper. The combination was easy. She taught it to me as a child, saying it was our special secret. 10/31/1919, her birthday. Inside was $50,000 in cash and another note: "For when you're ready to fly, little bird. And when you do, remember that every receipt matters. Love, Grandma E." Receipts, of course. Grandma had been an accountant before she'd married into the Addams family. I started keeping track of everything, photographing every family document I could find during my secret visit. In my father's study, I found something that made me gasp. A folder marked O situations. Inside were rejection letters, dozens of them. Culinary schools, internship programs, job offers, all addressed to me, all hidden. The cruelest one was from the Culinary Institute of America, offering me a full scholarship based on a recommendation from my high school home economics teacher. The response, forged in my handwriting: "Thank you, but I've decided to stay close to family. I took photos of everything, my hands shaking with rage. But the worst discovery came when I found their family group chat printed out. Pugsley had always been careless with technology. The messages went back years. She made another one of her happy little dinners. It's embarrassing. Morticia, at least the funeral clients like the free food. We just tell them it's our family recipe. Gomez. LOL, she has no idea we charge the clients for catering and pocket the money. Pugsley. Sometimes I wonder if we should tell her the truth about the will. Wednesday. Never. Mother Esther's inheritance dies with us. Morticia. Grandmother's inheritance. There was more. I grabbed everything I could carry and left before anyone returned. Back in my apartment, I spread all the evidence across my kitchen counter like ingredients for the most important meal of my life. They hadn't just neglected me or overlooked me. They'd actively sabotaged me, used me, and stolen from me. And Wednesday the prosecutor, Wednesday the truth seeker, had known. They'd all known. I looked at Grandma Esther's note again. Every receipt matters. She hadn't just meant financial receipts. She'd meant proof, evidence, a paper trail that would stand up in court. I smiled grimly and opened a new notebook, titling it Recipe for Justice. It was time to start cooking. The Salem Public Library opened at 9 a.m., and I was waiting at the door. The reference number from Grandma's letter led me to a section I'd never explored, the rare cookbook collection. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, Jimmy's grandmother, as it turned out, smiled when she saw what I was looking for. Oh, the Esther Adams collection. She donated these with very specific instructions. Said only an Adams who truly loved cooking would ever find them. She pulled out a box of what looked like antique cookbooks, but inside, between the pages of the Boston Cooking School cookbook, was a manila folder marked "For Octavia's Eyes Only." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and a letter from Grandma Esther's lawyer explaining everything. She'd set up a trust fund for me worth $500,000, specifically designated for Octavia's culinary education and career. But there was a catch. The trustees were my parents, who were supposed to inform me of its existence on my 25th birthday. I was now 29. They'd been collecting the interest for 4 years. Mrs. Chen, who'd been watching my face grow paler, quietly brought me some tea. "Your grandmother was a smart woman," she said softly. "She knew your family might forget to tell you things. That's why she left copies here, where only someone who genuinely loved cooking would look." I spent the entire day at the library, documenting everything. But I needed more than old documents. I needed to know what my family had been doing with my name and my work recently. I started with the food community. I reached out to food bloggers, critics, and restaurant owners, presenting myself honestly for the first time. The responses were shocking. "Octavia Adams? Morticia's daughter? We've been trying to reach you for years," said James Morrison, the city's most influential food critic. "Your mother always said you were too fragile for the public eye, but your food at those funeral events is extraordinary." That's when I learned the full extent of the deception. My parents had been running a side catering business using my cooking, charging premium prices for Morticia Adams's Gothic cuisine. They'd made over $200,000 in the last 3 years alone. Meanwhile, they'd been telling me the funeral home was barely breaking even and couldn't afford to pay me for my help. One food blogger showed me something that made my stomach turn: my mother's Instagram account, where she posted photos of my dishes with captions like "Another Addams Family secret recipe" and "Cooking runs in our blood." She had 50,000 followers and multiple sponsorship deals. But the universe seemed to be conspiring to help me. Jimmy Chen found me at the library one day, looking embarrassed. "Hey, Ms. Adams, I'm really sorry about Halloween. We didn't know, we heard what your mom said. That wasn't cool." He shuffled his feet. "My grandma says you're here every day researching something if you need help with anything." That's how I got my teenage army. Jimmy and his friends became my reconnaissance team. They were tech-savvy in ways I wasn't, finding digital trails I'd never have discovered. They found the secret business accounts, the hidden social media profiles, even video testimonials my mother had been selling to a documentary crew about the culinary secrets of the Addams family, all featuring my recipes. Amy Chen, Jimmy's sister at the Food Network, was even more helpful. "We've been wanting to feature you for years," she told me over coffee. "But every time we reached out, your mother said you weren't interested. She even sent us a cease and desist letter once, claiming you had an exclusive contract with the family business. There was no contract. There never had been. I started building my case like I was developing a complex sauce, layer by layer, reducing it down to its essence. Every receipt, every email, every forged document went into a file. I hired Mr. Blackwood, the lawyer from Grandma's documents, who looked at everything with growing excitement. "Your grandmother was right to prepare for this," he said. "She knew your family would try to steal your inheritance, but she didn't know they'd steal your career too. This is fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. We have enough to bury them." But I didn't want to bury them. That was their way. I wanted something better. "What if," I said, thinking like a chef planning a menu, "we serve them their own medicine? What if we expose them using their own methods?" Mr. Blackwood smiled. "You mean a public reveal? During a family gathering?" "Exactly. But it needs to be perfect. Every detail. Every moment, every revelation, timed precisely." That's when I remembered something Grandma had taught me. The best meals tell a story, Octavia. Each course should build on the last, leading to a finale that no one forgets. Thanksgiving was coming, the perfect holiday for revealing what you're truly grateful for and what you're not. I spent the next 2 weeks perfecting my plan. I practiced my presentation in front of my bathroom mirror, then in front of my sourdough starter. At least the yeast culture was more supportive family than my real one. Every document was copied, organized, and ready. Every ally was briefed on their role. But there was one more thing I needed: the perfect venue. That's when Mr. Blackwood revealed another surprise. "Your grandmother owned more than just recipes, Octavia. She owned property. There's a Victorian mansion on Essex Street that's been in trust for you. Your parents have been telling everyone it was sold, but they've just been renting it out and keeping the money. The mansion where Grandma Esther had grown up. The place where she'd learned to cook. The perfect setting for my revelation dinner. Thanksgiving was 4 weeks away, and I approached planning it like I was preparing for the most important service of my life. Every detail had to be perfect. Every flavor had to build to the final course. And just like any great meal, timing would be everything. First, I sent out invitations for the Addams Family Thanksgiving feast. A new tradition begins. I made them elaborate, Gothic, expensive looking, the kind of invitation my mother couldn't resist bragging about to her society friends. The venue was listed as the Esther Adams Memorial Dining Hall, the Victorian mansion that I now knew was rightfully mine. I told my parents it was a pop-up restaurant space I'd won through a Food Network contest. They believed it because they'd never bothered to learn how my industry actually worked. Finally, doing something worthwhile with that cooking hobby, my mother had said, already planning her outfit. "Make sure everything is properly Adams. We have a reputation to maintain." If only she knew. I reached out to my growing network of allies. Jimmy Chen and his friends were eager to help, partly out of guilt for the Halloween pranks, partly because they thought the whole thing was epic drama, like a reality show but better. I hired them as servers for the night, paying them well from Grandma's fund. "Just serve the food and be invisible," I instructed, "until I give you the signal." I contacted 3 prestigious food critics, 2 reporters from the Salem Gazette, and a documentary crew that had been trying to film authentic New England food traditions. I told them they'd witness the unveiling of secret Addams family recipes that had never been shared publicly. Technically true, they'd never been shared under the right name. Amy Chen from the Food Network was particularly excited. "This could be your break, Octavia. A family reconciliation story with amazing food. That's television gold." If only she knew it would be more like television dynamite. The menu required 2 weeks of planning. Each course would represent a different family lie, though they wouldn't know it until the reveal. First course, false foundations, a deconstructed soup with hidden ingredients, each one representing a stolen opportunity. 28 ingredients for 28 destroyed chances. Second course, stolen harvest, using vegetables from seeds I'd secretly saved from Grandma Esther's garden before my mother had it destroyed. Proof that something beautiful could grow from buried dreams. Third course, the imposter. 2 identical-looking dishes, one made from my recipe, one from Morticia's cookbook version, a blind taste test for the ages. Fourth course, burden of proof, a perfectly balanced dish that would collapse if any element was removed, just like their House of Lies. Fifth course, devil's food cake, Grandma Esther's masterpiece. The cake was special. According to her recipe, it needed flour from the old pantry. Safe combination 10/31/1962. Halloween 1962. The day she'd met Grandpa at a masquerade ball. I knew that safe. It was hidden in the mansion's original kitchen, behind what looked like a regular cupboard. Inside, I found not flour, but the real treasure. Grandma's will, the actual one, dated after the version my parents had filed. The will was devastating to my family and beautiful to me. Not only did it leave me everything my parents had claimed, but it also included a clause. If any family member deliberately sabotaged, stole from, or emotionally abused me, they would forfeit their entire inheritance. Grandma had thought of everything. Mr. Blackwood reviewed it with barely contained glee. "This is ironclad. Your grandmother must have suspected something like this would happen. She knew her son," I said simply, "and she knew what kind of woman he'd married." 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I did a full rehearsal at the mansion. The dining room was perfect, Gothic enough to appeal to my family's aesthetic, but bright enough to actually see the food. I had professional photographers document every dish, creating a portfolio that would later prove the recipes were mine. I also started my psychological campaign. I attended Sunday dinner at the mansion, bringing a new dish I was testing for Thanksgiving. I watched my mother taste it, praise it to her society friends who joined us, and then tell me it was adequate but needs more Adam's flair. "Of course, Mother," I said sweetly. "I've been studying your cookbook for inspiration." She preened at the mention of her cookbook. Wednesday shot me a suspicious look, but I maintained my facade of the dutiful, overlooked daughter. 3 days before Thanksgiving, everything was in place. The critics were confirmed. The documentary crew was ready. The teenagers knew their roles. I'd even hired a court reporter to document everything said during dinner, telling my family it was for a cookbook I'm writing about family traditions. The night before Thanksgiving, as I did my final prep work in the mansion's kitchen, I found one last surprise from Grandma Esther. Hidden in the recipe box was a photo of her and me when I was 5, covered in flour and laughing as we made cookies. On the back, she'd written, "The only real Adams in the bunch. Make them eat their words, my darling." I would, Grandma. I would make them eat their words, their lies, and their just desserts. The Victorian mansion glowed with candlelight as guests arrived. I'd been cooking since 4 a.m., every burner firing, every timer set. Jimmy Chen and his friends looked professional in their formal serving attire. You'd never recognize them as the Halloween pranksters from weeks ago. "Remember," I told them as we did final prep, "serve everything with dignity until I say the word verification. Then you know what to do." The food critics arrived first, notebooks already out. The documentary crew set up their cameras discreetly in the corners. The society reporters mingled, eager for gossip. And then, fashionably late as always, my family swept in. Morticia wore her finest black velvet, looking like Gothic royalty. "Octavia," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I do hope you've properly represented the Addams culinary traditions. We have a reputation to maintain." "Oh, I've represented everything accurately," I replied. For the first time ever, actually. Gomez was already networking with the wealthy guests, while Wednesday observed everything with her prosecutor's eye. Only Pugsley seemed relaxed, already eyeing the bar. "Welcome, everyone," I began, standing at the head of the table. My table, in my grandmother's house, though they didn't know it yet. Tonight's menu tells the true story of the Addams family recipes. Each dish will reveal something special. The first course arrived, false foundations. "This soup," I explained as guests tasted, "contains 28 hidden ingredients. Each one represents an opportunity that was kept secret. For instance, this saffron, it represents the Culinary Institute scholarship that was hidden from me. This truffle oil, the internship in Paris that was declined in my name without my knowledge." I watched my parents exchange glances. Morticia's smile faltered slightly. "Fascinating technique," one critic murmured, while the documentary camera zoomed in on my mother's tightening grip on her wine glass. The second course, Stolen harvest, had the guests moaning with pleasure. These vegetables, I announced, were grown from seeds saved from my grandmother Esther's garden, the one that was destroyed the day after her funeral. But good things have a way of surviving attempts to bury them. How resourceful, Wednesday said slowly, her legal mind clearly working. By the third course, the imposter. The tension was electric. I presented two identical-looking plates. One plate uses a recipe from the best-selling Deadly Delicious cookbook. The other is my original. I wonder if anyone can tell which is which. Mother, since it's your cookbook, would you like to try? Morticia confidently pointed to the left plate. This is obviously the family recipe. The complexity? The depth? That's Octavia's original. 3 critics said in unison. One added, the one on the right is good, but it lacks the sophistication. It's like someone tried to copy a masterpiece, but didn't understand the fundamentals. The documentary crew captured my mother's face, turning white as bone china. Interesting, I said mildly, considering every recipe in that cookbook was created by me, stolen by you, published under your name. But we'll get to that. This is ridiculous. Gomez started to stand, but I held up my hand. We're not done yet. 4th course. Burden of proof came with a visual demonstration. I showed how removing any element caused the perfectly balanced dish to fall apart, like a house of lies, I said, making eye contact with each family member. Remove one piece of evidence and everything collapses. That's when Jimmy and his friends wheeled in boards covered with documents, every forged letter, every hidden opportunity, every theft meticulously displayed. What is this? Morticia hissed. Verification, I said clearly. On that signal, the teenagers unveiled everything. Bank statements showing the catering money my parents stole. Screenshots of the Real Adams Only group chat. The adoption papers my mother had started. The medical bills proving I hadn't bankrupted them. The real bankruptcy papers showing Gomez's pet coffin pyramid scheme. The food critics were frantically taking notes. The society reporters were practically vibrating with excitement. The documentary crew moved in for close-ups of the evidence. And now, I announced as Jimmy brought out the devil's food cake. Dessert, made from Grandma Esther's special recipe. I cut the cake with deliberate precision, then pulled out a document from beneath the cake stand. Theatrical, yes, but Grandma would have approved. This is Grandma Esther's real will, I announced. The one dated after the version you filed, Mom and Dad. Mr. Blackwood? The lawyer stepped forward from where he'd been waiting. The will is authentic and legally binding. It leaves everything to Miss Octavia Adams, the house you're sitting in, the recipes you've stolen, and a considerable fortune. Furthermore, there's a clause about abuse and theft that means the rest of you are now disinherited. Wednesday grabbed the papers with shaking hands. Speed reading with her prosecutor's training. Her face went through several expressions before landing on something I'd never seen before. Respect. She paused, looking at me. This is bulletproof. You built a legal case that would stand up in any court. I learned from watching you, sister. Just applied it to cooking instead of crime. Morticia stood, her composure finally cracking. You ungrateful little... I'm extremely grateful, I interrupted. Grateful that you finally showed me at Halloween what you really thought. Grateful that Grandma Esther prepared for your greed. And grateful that everyone here got to witness the truth. Amy Chen from the Food Network stood up. Octavia, we'd like to offer you a show. Truth through food? Revealing family stories through cuisine. This dinner alone could be our pilot episode. The documentary director nodded enthusiastically. This is the most authentic family drama we've ever captured. It's revolutionary. My mother turned to the cameras, trying to salvage something. This is all a misunderstanding. We've always supported Octavia's little hobby. Your Instagram says otherwise, Jimmy interrupted, holding up his phone. You've been taking credit for her recipes for years. It's all documented online. The room erupted. Critics were calling their editors. Reporters were already typing on their phones. The society gossips were practically glowing with the scandal. But the sweetest moment came when Gordon Ramsay appeared on Jimmy's laptop screen via video call. Amy had arranged it as a surprise. Octavia! His voice boomed through the speakers. These pretentious fuckers have been hiding your talent? That's criminal. You're coming to my kitchen next month. And as for you, He pointed at my mother through the screen. Claiming someone else's recipes as your own? You're everything wrong with food culture. You're done in this industry. Morticia sat down heavily, finally understanding that her empire of lies had crumbled like an overbaked souffle. I raised my glass of wine, the good stuff I'd bought with my own money. Happy Thanksgiving to the Addams family. Thank you for teaching me exactly what family shouldn't be. And thank you for giving me the best story the food world has ever seen. The teenagers started slow clapping. Then the critics joined. Then everyone except my family was applauding while the cameras rolled. I looked at each family member. You're welcome to finish your dessert. It's the last thing I'll ever cook for you. Oh, and you have 30 days to vacate my grandmother's properties, all of them. Mr. Blackwood has the eviction notices. As I walked toward my real guests, the critics, the reporters, the people who valued my work, I heard Pugsley say quietly, "We deserved that. Every course of it." Wednesday agreed. 6 months later, I stood in my restaurant, Octavia's Garden, watching the dinner rush with deep satisfaction. The restored Victorian mansion, yes, Grandma Esther's house, had been transformed into Salem's hottest dining destination. The Gothic bones of the building remained, but I'd filled it with light warmth and the aroma of honest food made with love. "Chef, we're fully booked through next October," Amy Chen announced. She'd left the Food Network to become my restaurant manager, believing in my vision more than corporate television. And that's just for regular dining. The waiting list for your Sunday Story Suppers is 2 years long. Sunday Story Suppers, where families came to share their real stories over food, inspired by my Thanksgiving revelation. It had become a phenomenon, a place where truth was served alongside 5 courses. Table 7 wants to send their compliments to the chef, Jimmy said, now my sous chef, after discovering a real passion for cooking. They specifically mentioned that the butternut squash soup changed their life, said it tasted like honesty. That soup, the one my mother had pushed away with disgust, it was now my signature dish, featured in the New York Times as a metaphor for authenticity in edible form. The recipe was in my cookbook, my real cookbook, which had sold 500,000 copies in 3 months. The lawsuit had been swift and decisive. Mr. Blackwood had handled everything brilliantly. Not only did I receive my full inheritance in the properties, but my parents had to pay back every cent they'd earned from my recipes, plus damages for fraud and identity theft. The total came to $1.8 million. Morticia and Gomez now lived in a small apartment above the last funeral home they owned, the only property not purchased with Grandma Esther's money. The society pages had feasted on their downfall for months. Gothic dynasty crumbles. How one Thanksgiving dinner exposed years of culinary theft remained the Salem Gazette's most read article. They tried to fight back, of course. Fake Yelp reviews appeared nightly until Wednesday, in her first act of sisterly support, used her legal connections to trace them back to our parents and threaten them with cyber harassment charges. They'd tried to claim I'd poisoned them at Thanksgiving until the documentary footage proved otherwise. They'd even tried to start their own restaurant, which closed after 3 weeks when no one could reproduce their recipes. Octavia, a familiar voice made me turn. Wednesday stood in the entrance, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Beside her was Pugsley, holding a bouquet of black dahlias, my favorite flowers, something I was surprised he remembered. "We know we don't deserve your forgiveness," Wednesday said, her usual prosecutor's confidence replaced with genuine humility. "But we'd like to earn it. We were complicit in their abuse. We saw it happening and did nothing. That makes us guilty too." Pugsley nodded. "You were never the family disappointment, Octavia. We were. We disappointed the only person in our family who actually knew how to love." I studied them for a moment. Over the past 6 months, they'd both made efforts. Wednesday had publicly defended me in court, even testified against our parents when they'd tried to contest the will. Pugsley had sent every one of his funeral clients to my restaurant, always paying full price and tipping generously. "Table for 2?" I asked finally. Their faces lit up with hope. "But you're sitting in the kitchen," I added. "You want to be family? You'll learn what real work looks like." They eagerly agreed, and I had Jimmy set them up at the chef's counter where they could watch the controlled chaos of service. As I plated the amuse-bouche for them, a tiny spoonful of butternut squash soup, Wednesday actually teared up. "I remember when you first made this," she said quietly. "I was 12. You were so proud, and Mom just dismissed it. I should have said something. We all should have done a lot of things differently, I replied. But that's the thing about cooking. You can always start fresh with the next dish. As I turned back to the kitchen, I caught sight of someone new at table 12, Daniel Morrison, the food critic's son who'd been covering my story since Thanksgiving. He was watching me with that soft smile I'd been noticing more and more lately. We'd been taking things slow, sharing late-night conversations over wine after the restaurant closed, bonding over our complicated families and love of simple, honest food. He raised his glass to me, and I felt that flutter I'd thought my family had killed forever. "Is that the journalist?" Wednesday asked, noticing my smile. "He seems different from the vultures Mom used to court." "He is," I said simply. "He sees me for who I am, not what I can do for him. That's what makes him family material, the real kind." My phone buzzed with a text from Gordon Ramsay. "Saw the review in Food and Wine. Brilliant work. Those parents of yours still trying to claim credit?" I showed the text to my siblings, who laughed. Actually laughed, something I hadn't heard from them in years. "They tried," Pugsley said. "Last week, Mom told someone at the grocery store that she taught you everything. The clerk recognized her from the documentary and said, 'Aren't you the woman who stole recipes from your daughter?' Mom left without buying anything. The dining room was full of joy. Couples on dates, families celebrating, friends gathering. My teenage former pranksters were now skilled line cooks, heading to culinary school with my recommendation letters. The food critics who'd witnessed my Thanksgiving revelation had become regulars, bringing colleagues to experience what one called the most honest food in New England. "Chef Adams?" A young woman approached nervously. "I'm Sarah. I saw your documentary. My family's been taking credit for my art for years, saying I'm too unstable to handle my own career. You gave me courage to fight back. Thank you." I hugged her, remembering my own pain. Family isn't always blood, Sarah. Sometimes it's the people who celebrate your talents instead of stealing them. As if to prove my point, my chosen family surrounded me in the kitchen. Jimmy and his friends, who'd gone from pranksters to dedicated cooks. Amy, who'd believed in me when my blood family didn't. Mr. Blackwood, who still stopped by weekly for dinner, always ordering the devil's food cake. And Daniel, who'd started leaving fresh herbs from his garden at my back door each morning with notes that made me smile. 5 minutes to the Gordon Ramsay interview, Amy called out. Tonight, I was doing a live interview for his new show about chef redemption stories. As my team prepared for the live filming, I thought about the last time I'd seen my mother. It was a month ago, at the grocery store. She'd approached me, looking older and smaller than I remembered. "Octavia," she'd said stiffly, "the house needs repairs we can't afford. Perhaps you could—" "Oh, Mom," I'd interrupted gently but firmly. "I'm not your servant anymore. I'm not your burden. And I'm definitely not your bank. If you need money, I hear the local restaurants are hiring. You could learn to actually cook." She'd walked away without another word, but I'd seen something in her eyes. Not remorse exactly, but recognition. She finally understood what she'd lost. The camera crew signaled they were ready. As the red light turned on and Gordon's face appeared on the screen, I stood tall in my kitchen, surrounded by my real family, in my grandmother's house that had become a temple to honest food and authentic love. "Octavia Adams," Gordon began with his trademark intensity. "You went from being told you should never have been born to becoming one of the most celebrated chefs in New England. How does that feel?" I smiled, thinking of Grandma Esther, of that Halloween night that changed everything, of the journey from servant to chef. My eyes found Daniel in the dining room, then swept over my siblings at the chef's counter, my young cooks at their stations, all the people who'd chosen to be in my life. "It feels like I finally found my real family recipe," I said, and the secret ingredient was always the truth. The dinner rush continued around me, a symphony of sizzling pans and satisfied customers. Every dish that left the kitchen carried a piece of my story, from rejection to redemption, from forgotten to celebrated, from wishing I'd never been born to being grateful for every moment of my hard-won life. Later that night, after the last customer left and the kitchen was clean, Daniel helped me lock up. "You know," he said, taking my hand as we stood in front of the restaurant, "your mother was wrong about everything, but especially one thing." "What's that?" I asked. The world needed you to be born. I needed you to be born. He squeezed my hand gently. Some of us just took longer to find you. I leaned into him, feeling complete in a way I never thought possible. My name is Octavia Adams, and I finally know exactly where I belong. In my kitchen, feeding souls, surrounded by people who see my worth, and maybe, just maybe, falling in love with someone who loves me not despite my scars, but because of how beautifully I'd healed them. And my parents? They get to watch from the outside, seeing my success in every food magazine, every television appearance, every glowing review. The daughter they wished had never been born had become everything they tried to prevent, and found everything they tried to deny her: success, family, and love. Grandma Esther was right. The best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies. It was becoming so successful. They had to watch you thrive. And thrive I did, one perfectly seasoned dish at a time, with a full heart and a full life. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing. Your support helps me share more stories of triumph over family adversity.